In fact, the selfish nature of masturbation has been shown to produce more intense orgasms than the real thing. What then becomes the real thing where orgasm is concerned? It has been argued that masturbation can become habitual and dull, or even negate healthy sexual relationships with real people. Well, I'm damn glad I didn't stop, judging from some of the sorry specimens touted as sexy in recent years. I've never been disappointed by my fantasies. I'm not antagonistic toward women whom nature has been unkind in the looks department. I love them dearly. I eschew women who deliberately make themselves look physically drab so they will be appreciated for their minds and not viewed as objects. They are as off-base as men who go overboard in their pursuit of seemingly masculine electives, believing that any sign of culture or sensitivity will mark them as pansies. A man can be very strong and resourceful, and still be gentle and sensitive. A woman can be physically glamorous, as well as physically capable and mentally advanced. But what of the urges in the loins of millions who know better, but yield to inferior people because visual animals that they are, plumage means a lot? They wind up enmeshed in dreary relationships because they are constantly trying to fool themselves into believing their mate is either more capable or intelligent than he or she really is. If they could have only begun a relationship with sexual needs as the prime factor, and not pretend that anything more would exist, they could more carefully evaluate genuine quality in another. Sex is exciting, but companionship is often more meaningful, especially for women. How many women seek companionship with men who have little or nothing to offer than physical presence? That is surely social masturbation. Many of you have known of the Church of Satan's goal to develop and promote the manufacture of artificial human companions. Movies and television have been priming the pump for years for development as inevitable as the automobile or airplane. Individuals throughout history have sculpted or pieced together physical likenesses of humans, but have done so as automata, usually accompanied by music and constructed for eccentric aristocrats. As an art form, contemporary sculptors like Dwayne Hansen, John D'Andrea, George Segal, and others have exhibited to shocked and gradually accepting audiences. PVC love dolls have proliferated in the back pages of men's magazines, always with a plain brown wrapper approach. The Church of Satan is the first organization to pull together the threads on one of the major industries of the future. The taboo against androids for companions has persisted largely due to the Frankensteinian or Pygmalionistic imitation of God trauma. This reason, more than any other, has impeded major manufacturers from proceeding with such a venture. Other economic factors must be considered as well. The purchase of automobiles, electronic leisure products, and other status purchases will diminish when artificial people become more impressive than the real ones the consumer has usually tried to impress. We as Satanists can really throw a curve to expectation when answering the usual, "What is Satanism all about?" with, "We manufacture artificial human beings," followed by, "In a few years you'll have at least one living with you." You can counter the, "Oh no I won't," with a wry smile and a "we'll see," knowing full well that you're a prophet in your own time. I can assure you that people-making requires a lot more imagination, skill, patience, and resourcefulness than rewriting the Enochian keys, or preparing for an authentic Babylonian lust ritual. Not long ago, one of my close associates mused, I wonder what some of our members will come up with in the way of innovation on their own once the cat is let out of the bag. Can you imagine a convention of Satanists, all accompanied by a humanoid of their own creation? I must admit that would create some real speculation other than the tired devil-worshipping thing. The field is so fresh, so wide open for development and experimentation, that a Satanist with some background in arts, crafts, computers, electronics, mechanics, woodworking, plastics, sewing, etc., can readily become a pioneer in a unique field. What can you do to help? Experiment on your own and let us know about it by way of descriptive text regarding materials and construction techniques, accompanied by photos. If enough Dr. Frankensteins put their minds together, a better product will evolve. In today's world, the creation of replacement or supplementary human beings is the most satanic activity possible. This is not meant as a replacement for the philosophy of Satanism as outlined in the Satanic Bible. It is a contemporary vehicle for it. The construction of artificial human companions. The means by which a humanoid may be constructed are as diverse as the choice of materials will allow. In the past, artificial human beings were fashioned of metal, the sections of the body joined as in a suit of armor, or else were formed of rubberized cloth or actual rubber stretched over a skeletal framework. The mechanism actuating the robot was contained inside. The most rudimentary android need be nothing more than convincingly visual and tactile substitutes. There is nothing wrong with this, as the prime appeal of the humanoid lies in its approximation of the purchaser's other half. As nature has intended us to fall in love at the first sight, that which is most enthusiastically seen will be enthusiastically accepted. Artificial companions that are pleasingly heard, smelled, and also felt constitute positive selling points. But that an artificial companion looks right is of primary importance. In such a new industry, there is no immediate need for planned obsolescence, as opportunity for constant improvement remains fresh and untapped. As competition between humanoid-producing factories develops, so will greater elaboration and intricacy of the android. Initially, there will be some reluctance to admit the use of androids, especially on the part of persons who most need them. Hence, concealability should be considered in the initial development of humanoids. Despite the ads one sees of actually grotesque, inflatable dolls accompanying gentlemen to the swimming pool parties, it is doubtful whether the egos of the purchasers reached by such ads have actualized that level of public insouciance, practical jokers excepted. Many early androids will undoubtedly be relegated to the bureau drawer, footlocker, or space under the garage workbench when not in use, to be brought out when the coast is clear. Before embarking on the project of building a humanoid, consideration should be given to the maker's requirements, needs for secrecy, and available talent and materials. If you want companionship of a purely visual nature, techniques employed by modern sculptors can be utilized. Figures may be carved of wood, styrofoam blocks cemented together, or cast molded in the many varieties of plastic available. If you choose this method, several good books on the market provide instruction on carving figures in wood and sculpturing with various plastic resins and fiberglass. Papier-mâché, plaster, and other methods are easily learned. The main disadvantage of making your android from such materials is lack of pliability and softness, along with a limitation of body movement. At worst, you will spend a great deal of time on a creature that is essentially a display mannequin when completed. If your requirements are largely voyeuristic, you will save much time by obtaining a discarded or damaged mannequin to use as a base upon which to build. Mannequins are generally cast from living persons, but it is unlikely you will find one ideally suited to your aesthetic demands. Most are extremely thin, so as to best display clothing, and many are abnormally lengthened in the torso, legs, arms, and neck. Male mannequins are invariably thinner than normal to facilitate dressing them. Women's faces tend to be aquiline or sterile, and men's bland. No store wants a seductive-faced woman or a compelling-faced man in its window detracting from the clothing hung upon them. Unless your taste runs to string beans in women and fashion plates in men, you will have to modify any mannequin. Though a mannequin makes a suitable base, its movements are usually limited to rearrangement of arms and hands. I have found that because parts are interchangeable, arms, hands, upper and lower halves of the body, spare parts add to the flexibility of positioning. My earliest humanoids were constructed from mannequins which I sectioned, cutting pieces out of legs, arms, necks, and torsos, rejoining them with fiberglass or celastic, and then adding a compound of resin and talc over areas built up with various materials. In this manner, I created some grotesque and beautiful people, just like real folks. If you are content to limit your artificial human to purely visual companionship, it doesn't matter how stony their surface. It can be painted depending upon your ability, as realistically as any living being might appear. If you want to shake hands with your creation or give it a little squeeze, however, you'd better have a highly developed imagination or your bubble will burst. Flexibility and tactile realisms are obvious improvements on rigidity. There are 3 basic methods I have employed to achieve these ends. A skin filled with air, a skin filled with stuffing, and a molded substance which is soft to the touch. Let us consider the type purveyed by sex-aid mail-order firms featuring advertisements of what appear to be ravishingly glamorous creatures. The purchaser excitedly opens his package to discover a thin vinyl, PVC not BVD, suit of long pink underwear with a stiff mask attached to its top. He tremblingly unpacks the plastic leotard and finds a valve into which he proceeds to blow until dizzy from hyperventilation. And he is rewarded with what appears to be a thalidomide hydrocephalic glamour girl. Any resemblance to a voluptuous damsel is purely mental. Some models sport a vaginal orifice, or plastic watch pocket, between the thighs, or other improvements. If you want to make your own inflatable companion, you can do a better job by cutting vinyl sheet with a combination tool that both slices and electrically welds a seam in the desired location. To get a reasonable figure, pin the vinyl on a live model, such as a dressmaker would, marking where the seams, joints, and darts will be. Remove the pins. Make sure they are outside the lines you have marked or you'll have leaks. And cut and weld the vinyl. The problem areas of this type of construction are head, hands, and feet. The head and neck must be constructed separately, then fitted as snugly as possible into the neck opening of the vinyl skin and glued with plastic cement to ensure an airtight seal. If you attempt to make the head by the same method as the rest of the figure, it will look like either a hydro or microencephalic. The same with hands and feet. They will either resemble picnic hams or tiny flippers. Stop construction at the wrists and ankles, and insert rigid ankles and feet in addition to separate hands fitted and joined at the wrists. These can be cast from life or salvaged from a mannequin. Seal the joints as you did with the neck. If you're careful, the joints will be barely detectable, as vinyl sheeting is extremely thin. In a convenient place the valve used for inflation either by electric welding or plastic cement used to repair beach toys. Any toy department will yield an inexpensive inflatable toy from which the valve may be removed. Don't be discouraged if your first attempts don't meet with your expectations, as experimentation and innovation will be your best teachers. The main disadvantage of the inflatable android is its inability to remain in any fixed position due to the equal distribution of air within. The human body is comprised of diverse degrees of intensity and muscle tone, not to mention an ingenious framework known as a skeleton. Tendons hold limbs and surfaces taut, and weight is suitably distributed for human actions. The next method of construction, a skin filled with stuffing, allows for some of these factors. Its main disadvantage is its lack of concealability. An inflatable doll can be stored in a small box, drawer, or carried about in a shopping bag until needed, an attribute real people lack. A stuffed figure takes up as much space as a bona fide human. Unlike the hard-surfaced mannequin type, it is flexible enough to compress somewhat, but nonetheless must be reckoned with if you are worried about storage facilities. A stuffed android can be constructed with or without a skeleton, though an internal framework will eliminate the unnatural stasis inherent in an inflated product. A basis skeleton may be constructed from dolls or metal or plastic tubing. Joints from hips, elbows, knees, etc. may be fashioned by slotting or pinning, or with commercially available ball and socket joints. Two hangers approximating shoulders in the pelvic region may be cut from wood, from which arms and legs are suspended. Marionette construction techniques are invaluable and should be studied, as should, of course, human anatomy. I have found that the most easily obtained and efficient substitute for a spinal column is a length of flexible tubing, such as is used for gooseneck lamps or electrical conduit. One end is fixed to the pelvis board, and the top end goes through the shoulder board, right up into the head. Thus, the torso and head may be positioned in any manner desired. The outer skin may be any type of material that can be sewn or glued, like electrically welded vinyl sheeting. Vinyl lacks the resiliency of human skin, however, that either rubber, sheeting, or stretch fabrics provide. Cut the pattern for the upper torso separate from the lower torso and legs. As with the inflatable doll, forget about the head and hands until later, as these can be problem areas. Close the neck and wrist with a sleeve-like extension to which will be added the head and hands. As with inflatable humanoids, I have found it best to insert rigid preformed feet and ankles. When constructing a stuffed figure, this must be done before the stuffing is inserted, pushing the feet, which are attached to the ends of the calf bones, into the outer skin, which has been formed much like the feet of children's sleepers. I have used a zipper, or Velcro, to fasten the two body sections together at the waist. This method not only allows greater ease of stuffing both sections, closing the zipper gradually until the proper amount of stuffing has been inserted, but provides access to the innards of your creation, should you wish to add various organs, either simple or sophisticated. It is amazing what can be accomplished using a little ingenuity. Faces can be cast from live persons using established moulage procedures. A flexible latex mask can be laced to a faceless head, the wig concealing the laces. Thus, if you tire of one face or basic expression, you can simply replace it with another as easily as tying your shoes. If your dream man or woman is not suitable for casting, sculpt him in clay, make a cast, and search no more. Wigs can either be pinned to the head or fastened with double-sided adhesive tape or Velcro. Plastics, which are highly toxic if worked by a hobbyist with limited facilities for ventilation, may be employed under industrial conditions. However, open or closed-cell flexible polyurethane foam is easily available in sheet or block form and can be realistically employed as flesh. Either wrap your armature or skeleton with it, or laminate entire blocks and carve with an electric knife. The finished body can be given a skin of PVC with a double-sided tape, or covered with a suitable body stocking. Electronics can easily be incorporated. Voice mechanisms are no challenge whatsoever. I have concealed small recorders into heads with the speaker opening under the wig. Pre-recorded cassettes inserted into a slot under the hairline provide convincing audible effect. Odors associated with humans are simple to provide, using perfumes, cologne, or worse. An entire congress of penises, vulvas, vaginas, scrotal sacs, breasts, nipples, etc. may be found in any sex goods store or catalog. With few exceptions, they are all disembodied. Let us rejoin them to the human forms where they belong. I have great respect for those who pioneer their own artificial human companions, crude as they might initially be. They will have come a small step closer to playing God and creating man or woman according to their desired image. With a creative outlet as cloaked in old age taboo as this, innovation may now run rampant, more so than any other art form man has yet to know. The bizarre twilight world of the ventriloquist, the puppet master, and the doll maker can perhaps be understood through other than the minds of psychologists. The acceptable schizoid element in all of us, one that selects our mates, has a fresh, new, open portal to pass through. Through surrogates, the race will survive. Misanthropia. H.L. Mencken said, "I reserve the right to be a lonely man. I don't crave companionship. It stands in my way. I live for pleasure. There are few persons who can give me as much pleasure as those acts I perform myself. I would rather create pleasure according to my own whim than be subject to the whims of others. Invariably, I wind up entertaining others, or educating them. There is no push-pull. It is only pull, and they do all the pulling. I find greater companionship in inert figures, animals, and speechless artifacts, for I can enjoy their presence, and there is no psychic drain. In fact, by their very stimulation in accordance with my tailored ideals, they provide me with not only entertainment, but food for thought. Why do I prefer androids to real humans? Androids can be created, programmed, and utilized exactly according to the master's whims. They require no energy-consuming interaction in order to salvage a non-existent ego. Yet, even the semblance of an ego can be built into an android via actions and words, but always according to the maker's requirements. They can be shelved when they grow tiresome, brought back out when needed, modified in appearance, and destroyed without moral conscience. They are ideal companions. They never talk back, unless you want them to, yet you can insult them to your heart's content. Insofar as work is concerned, that can be performed by either non-humanoid machines or humans of limited intelligence operating machines of greater intelligence, androids offer splendid companionship when cast in the physical semblance of human beings. And for all most people have to really say, they might as well say nothing. Essentially, they are merely decorations in a room, humanoids to alleviate what might be construed as loneliness. Most human interaction, being nothing more than small talk and games, is no waste of time to those so engaged. It is, in fact, necessary to their survival, for they would die of boredom otherwise. To the maker, the archetype, the self-sustainer, human interaction is usually a waste of the most precious thing in his vital existence, time. Time is spent in being liked, could better be devoted to liking being. It is easy for me to expand these attitudes. I do not search for a beloved, yet am loved by one who treads the stars. In addition, I can do as well as be. I can honestly say I am that I am. Unless one can, he cannot be interdependent. One must be whole before one can be alone and yet not alone. What keeps me going? What justifies my existence? That which sustains me is the knowledge that, were I to fall prey to trouble, to fail, to sicken, to die, it would please so many people that my strength is my existence. When I think of all those who would rejoice at my discomfort, I am energized and strengthened to the extent that I might overcome any malaise. It is not my love for mankind that sustains me, but rather mankind's resentment of me. My disdain and contempt for the mediocre masses in general, and those who calumniate me in particular, angers me to regeneration. My right I have made for myself, by not what I can do, but by how important it is for others that I be resented, maligned, misunderstood, and hated. You'll seldom hear me complain about my lot, for it is according to my precise design. Even if it were not, I doubt that I would gripe. I hate complainers. Nobody gives a shit about anyone else's grievances. When one caterwauls his trouble to another, it simply weakens the complainer in the listener's eyes. Far better to arouse further antagonism by disappointing your detractors by your refusal to display unease. I refuse to sicken because it will make my enemies healthier. I refuse to break off relations with any worthwhile companion because if I did, it would make others' loneliness more bearable. I refuse my sorrow to be known, for my sorrow is another's joy. I even dislike showing wrath, for to one who receives little attention, my wrath would brighten his heart. I admire my bull terrier, Typhon, who can rage and snarl and try to kill while wagging his tail. It is patently sport enjoyment for him to snarl and tear at his opponent. A great lesson can be learned from him. He will not give his victim the satisfaction of thinking that, in his rage, he might be unhappy. On the contrary, he is a blight to his victim all the more, because his victim can never be satisfied as a masochist is satisfied by another's drubbing. Unless you can rejoice in making your antagonist miserable, your antagonist will sap your vitality by the humorless wrath he has incurred in you. The sobriety of your anger will increase your unintended charity with each blow you strike, and you will be lesser for it. Through practice, I now enact my formula of turning rage into enjoyable sport so automatically and effortlessly that it is seldom, if ever, possible for another to reap pleasure from my anger. I defy ill wishes of my enemies by rejoicing in their discomfort. If I did not pain them, I should not be their enemy. If I need do nothing save exist in my present form in order to make enemies, I am indeed fortunate, for to know me is to hate me. One hates what one fears. He who is feared has power. I am lucky. I have acquired power without conscious effort, but simply by being. I will never die because my death would enrich the unfit. I could never be that charitable. Is it irony that the only times I have progressed is when I have hurt someone else? Or does evil really conquer goodness in the end? It appears that evil, fear, is the prime mover, while goodness is complacency and stagnation. Goodness invokes either approbation or saccharine contempt. Evil creates actions and reaction. Without that, the race would have died long ago. Not that that would have been so terrible, save it would have meant the extermination of the devils, those persons who love life enough to want to consciously experience its pleasures, the pleasures they devise and discover on their own. Once upon a time, when I had certain befuddled ideals, I might have found John Donne's "No man is an island" justification of mediocrity inclusive of myself. Because people need people is now too little justification for their existence. I need persons, certain persons, not people. The word people has achieved an egalitarian connotation I find repugnant. There are some men who are islands, entire of themselves, but most are pieces of the continent, parts of the main. If a clod, and clods they be, is washed away by the sea, the mainland is richer, albeit smaller. If a promontory were washed away, then some small alarm might be caused if one's manor, built from unique efforts, stood upon it. But no man's death, save he who stands by me, diminishes me. Other men's deaths make the earth a sweeter, finer place for those who have the capacity to relish each moment spent upon it. Each useless drone's death enriches me. I am involved in growth, and the incompetent dead can at best provide fertilizer. Then, though the land may be lesser in size, it will be richer in soil, and lusher in visage. Therefore, never send to know whom the bell tolls. It tolls because someone is being paid to pull on the rope. Diabolica. I never met a person who loved everybody I didn't dislike. What good are friends if they can't do you any good? Man prides himself on being the only animal who can modify his nature. Yet when he chooses to do so, he is called a phony. The hunter must hunt. The moment he stops, he becomes the hunted. Strive, reach, take. Then you shall not be taken. After an inferior man has been taught a doctrine of superiority, he will remain as an inferior as he was before his lesson. He will merely assume himself to be superior and attempt to employ his recently learned tactics against his own kind, whom he will then consider his inferiors. With each inferior man enjoying what he considers his unique role, the entire bunch will be reduced to a pack of strutting, foppish, self-centered monkeys, gamboling about on an island of ignorance. There they will play their games under the supervision of their keeper, who was and always will be a superior man. Never enter a business deal with anyone who has less than yourself. Distrust experts unless it is obvious that their expertise is paying off. Be wary of advice from one who is less successful than yourself. W.C. Fields used to advise, never smarten up a chump. He must have known the dire consequences that can ensue when a simpleton acquires a modicum of sophistication. Creeps are beings who, as Thoreau said, live out their lives in quiet desperation. It is best to leave them that way, because creeps, if energized with a soupçon of self-importance, often become shit disturbers. Creeps can be contained and seldom cause trouble to anyone but themselves. Shit disturbers are impossible to deal with in any civilized manner. Stay clear of shit disturbers. Self-improvement books. Those who need them won't read or heed them. Don't help someone who has proven himself a consistent failure in the past. Definition of good and evil. Good is what you like. Evil is what you don't like. Too much freedom is dangerous to those who cannot cope with the responsibilities that accompany independence. The true test of anyone's worth as a living creature is how much he can utilize what he has. Those who come begging for help want to hear that I can help them. They don't really want to be helped, though. If they could stop searching for help, they would die of satisfaction. I don't want to implement such dire consequences. If I even begin to help them, they will soon hate me and try to make trouble. Therefore, I tell them I will help them, sell them promises, and let them fall before their ships come in. And that way, I do truly help them. I save them for future failures. Each misdirected act of compassion is a waste of magical energy, popularly expressed by the phrase, "no good deed ever goes unpunished." Anyone who retains acquaintances as friends, particularly those who are in constant disagreement with him, is either incapable of attracting anyone else or feeding a masochistic need. There are many who would take my time. I shun them. There are some who would share my time. I am entertained by them. There are precious few who contribute to my time. I cherish them. When quarreling with someone who is dear to you, transfer your mutual wrath to someone you dislike, and you will be surprised at the results. Hair on a man's chest is thought to denote strength. The gorilla is the most powerful biped and has hair on every place on his body except for his chest. Bertrand Russell has equated logic with mathematics. I equate the brain and its potential with a thing called soul, or spirit. Large breasts are associated with feminine women, regardless of the slenderness of their hips. The capacity of a milk container cannot be told by its outside dimensions. Femininity is more accurately displayed by generous hips. Guess you can tell I favor women with big asses. The Holy Bible has been criticized by scholars because of its self-contradictions. I don't object to that, for it was designed to confound and confuse. As an historic propaganda document, it is unexcelled. My objection is in its utility and reinterpretation long after its original purpose has become exhausted. If self-preservation is the highest law, the self has its own laws which validate its existence. The first is stimulation. The second is identity. Man is the only animal in whom the self-preservation law is enacted after he has willingly subjected himself to the machinations of his own destruction. A martyr is a man who allows others to atone for their guilt by feeling sorry for him. Each constitute of the martyr enters a contest to see who can wail the loudest and the longest. The winners are those with the guiltiest conscience. Control, religious or political, must exist because the populace demands to be enslaved. Only when it feels sufficiently enslaved can the dissenters produce their collective grunt. Dissension is a weak form of assertion. Assertion is a weak form of creation. Egalitarianism is a condition whereby society is governed by the whim of its most inferior members, whose strength lies solely in numbers. As provender, their flesh is inferior to that of a good heifer or spring lamb. If an area of the world is a dung heap, you can be sure unprocessed egalitarians have made it so. Let such manure be spread where it will do some good. Nature, in her ineffable wisdom, wastes nothing. Seemingly useless but parasitic or destructive persons should be used like clay pigeons for target practice. The most efficient street cleaner in an egalitarian society is a riot gun. When people ask me, what gives you the right to suggest standards for others? My answer is, if I don't, someone else, perhaps less qualified, will. History has proven that qualification is based on acceptance. The end justifies the means. Right, like water, seeks its own level. Man's consent is not necessary to the operations of satanic forces. It is not required. It is not even asked.